seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 47 minutes after the hour here on this Friday, February 12th, 2016, as we analyze the sixth Democratic debate between Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton. Joining me now is the Washington editor for The Nation, George Zornick, also on Twitter at gzornick, thenation.com. George, good morning.
Good morning, Igor. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being with us. It was a late night for all of us as we were, but thankfully the debate ended right at 11, so I'm sure you got great sleep.
I was in bed at 11:05.
Oh wow! You boom, right? That's a good practice. You knew you were coming here, so I appreciate that you got this restful sleep for us. Listen.
Oh, my pleasure.
Let me ask you kind of the overarching question that I've been struggling to answer about the Hillary strategy in going after Bernie, and that is this. So they are looking at bits of his record. They are examining things he said in the past to argue that he's not as progressive as he may seem because he took a vote here or there on immigration, on guns, that doesn't line up with today's notions of what progressives should look like. My question to you is, who is the voter who thinks, Bernie isn't as progressive as I thought he was, I'm going to go support Hillary? Like, what is the thinking here behind hitting him so hard?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for the most...
Are you there, George?
George, you there?
He got a lot of sleep, but he didn't fix his phone, is what happened. But, Peter, that for me is the big question in their entire approach, is if this election is about being hopeful and thinking big and not worrying about specifics and being aspirational, then why are you tearing down the candidate who represents that in your party?
Right. I mean, this is to me an issue and a problem that we as a party have, right? Like, you talked about this a lot during the show already. If you think that everything is 100% A-OK, no problems whatsoever, and things are great, why are you running for president? Right?
Yeah.
So it's time to just own up to the fact that there are things that can be done better, and you think you're the candidate that can do them better. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I really don't.
And there's also nothing wrong in talking about these ideas in broad approaches. Like, I know that Hillary's go-to is immediately to think, how are we going to operationalize this?
Yeah.
And that probably makes her a fabulous leader, right?
Yes.
Like a
Yes.
great leader. But that's not what voters want to hear.
I've said this 100 times. I think Hillary would be a wonderful, wonderful president. I think she's a bad candidate.
Yeah.
And that's just to say, like, if she could get her act together as a candidate, she'd win this thing. And that's a lesson of a guy like Bernie, right?
All right.
Like,
George is back with us. It looks like he plugged his phone in finally. George, is that your sense as well, that the problem here is that she just doesn't have the ability or really the desire to think in these broad strokes that inspire people like Bernie, and is immediately drawn to, how do we make this work? How do we get this done?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways she's just not speaking to the voter. And while overall she's run a decent campaign, often I've thought, and it's kind of frustrating, that she's running a campaign that is targeted far more at pleasing sort of beltway pundits, for a better word, than the actual people who are going out there and voting for Bernie. I mean, a lot of her complaints are sort of like narrow and ticky-tack. Like, he's out there talking about the Iraq War, which I think a lot of people are still frustrated over and disgusted by, and she is relentlessly pointing out that, he has a low bench of foreign policy advisors, which is a completely fair attack, and it's something that, as a professional who covers these things, I think it looks bad for Bernie. But it's things like that makes me wonder, like, who is she trying to convince with that? If there's a regular voter out there who, had a neighbor who was deployed in the war and thought it was terrible and really likes that Bernie's talking about it, the fact that the campaign says, "Oh, Bernie doesn't talk to so and so foreign policy advisors," they think, "Okay, fine. I mean, so what?" And it's a lot of these small bore attacks that kind of leave me scratching my head. Is like broaden the message a little bit,
Yeah, but that's really fair though on the foreign policy, because it drives me, George, up a wall that he's had all this time to really define what a progressive foreign policy looks like in detail. That's beyond, we'll just get some people together and they'll fight ISIS. We'll just build a coalition.
That's pretty good.
You gotta really talk about how you're gonna do that, how you're gonna operationalize that, how that's different than what Obama's currently trying to do when it comes to ISIS and Syria. Why do you think he hasn't taken the time to really think this through?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a progressive foreign policy space that, frankly, most people haven't filled, and Bernie is as guilty as any of them, especially, and in fact, most guilty, because he has really the big opportunity to do it. We've seen Chris Murphy in the Senate try to fill in this space a little bit. He had a big speech about creating a new progressive foreign policy. I didn't see it gain much traction, but he's thinking about it. It's funny because it's one area where he can really...
It's a big value add, right? It's a big value add to the conversation. George Zornick, the Washington editor for The Nation, at George Zornick, thenation.com. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna keep beating this horse, though, through the debates, through the campaign, because, look, he's thought a lot about the economic issues. That's his bread and butter. But there's a lot to say here about how do you keep Americans safe in a way that makes sense in the modern world, and in a way that doesn't involve or doesn't immediately go to military might. And somebody needs to articulate that version. And I just wish that person could be Bernie or Hillary, but let's really, really talk about it in a real way. We'll be back.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
So you're drowning in student debt, and it looks like there's no way out. Have you considered bankruptcy? Of course not. It's a dirty word, and everything you've heard says students can't file anyway. It didn't start that way. Bankruptcy laws were enacted in the 19th century to give people a fresh start. But not all debt is created equal. Take this, for example. We have you, your buddy Carlos, and your grandma Lucy. Carlos got laid off. His credit card debt was too much to handle, so he filed for bankruptcy. Will totally screw his credit, but at least he can start fresh, and after 10 years, his credit report should be fine. Grandma Lucy's home lost half its value. Now her mortgage isn't worth paying back. She says F it and decides to file for bankruptcy too. Then there's you. You didn't land that dream job, you're struggling to make ends meet, but the interest just keeps piling up. With a broken heart, you've written off the possibility of buying a home, having kids, and getting married because, hello, who wants to deal with your crazy baggage? But in reality, you want those things, and your education was supposed to get you there. Now you need a fresh start, just what bankruptcy was intended for. You try to file, like Carlos and Grandma Lucy, and that's when you realize it's not as easy for you as it was for them. In the 70s, Congress worried that students were using bankruptcy to abuse loan programs. That wasn't quite true. Still, over the years, Congress gradually stripped student debtors of their options. The Bankruptcy Reform Act of 1978 was even called discriminatory toward students by the chairman of the subcommittee. Student debt was singled out and lumped with criminal debts. Today, if student debtors try filing for bankruptcy anyway, they'll need to prove their debt imposes an undue hardship. But who's to say what qualifies as an undue hardship? Even some judges have said they don't get it. This lack of clarity in the law could work in your favor. A Harvard researcher discovered in 2012 that few students actually try to discharge their loans through bankruptcy. Of the students who filed for bankruptcy to settle other debts, only 0.1% tried the same tactic on their school debt. The craziest part? Just under half of them got their debts fully or partially discharged. In other words, you can file for bankruptcy on your student loans, depending on your situation, It might just be a matter of trying. At least there's that.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
This is the Bill Press Show.
57 minutes after the hour, almost done with hour one of the Bill Press Show. And we haven't even gotten to what was the highlight for many folks on Twitter, what trended on Twitter during the debate. And that is, of course, Mr. Henry Kissinger, who at 92 is still making headlines in Democratic debates, which is pretty fantastic for him, probably. I gotta say though, ooh, Henry Kissinger. If you're gonna point to one person who you think is a model, should that person really be Henry Kissinger?
Well, I don't know why that name came up. It was not good. It was not a good moment.
Not a good moment. And Bernie correctly said, my advisor's not Henry. You don't know who my advisors are, but it's not Henry Kissinger. If it's one, I know who it's not. It's not. I don't know who it is, but I know that it's not Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
It's definitely not Henry Kissinger. Oi, I say to that. Oi, they. Back in a moment for hour two.
This is the Bill Press Show.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
All right, guys, I want to take the last part of the day to change our focus and talk a little bit about water. There's rivers, there's lakes, there's huge oceans. You get thirsty, you just go and you get some water, right? We rely on rain for our water. We even rely on snow. But what if it doesn't rain? What if it doesn't snow? We have to get the word out about water conservation. I want you to tell your parents, your friends, your neighbors, how important it is to save water. It's up to you guys to save the planet. All right? What if it doesn't rain? What if it doesn't snow? We have to get the word out about water conservation. It's up to you guys to save the planet.
Hi, I'm Mark LaFleur, and I produced the short film you just watched called Aquaforce. California is experiencing one of the worst droughts it's ever had, and now, more than ever, it's important for everyone to do their part to help conserve water. The reason I made this film is because I wanted to make something fun and informative that would get people talking about the California drought. Obviously, this is an important issue because we have a limited amount of clean drinking water. I think it was very important to let people know, especially young people, that this is an important resource, maybe our most important resource, and it's something that we can't take for granted and we certainly can't waste. I really wanted this to be something that children would respond to. The kind of thing that any kid anywhere in the world, no matter what language they speak, could understand the story and be entertained by it and leave it knowing that this is something important, that if they didn't already know about this, that it's now going to be a part of the way that they think about water, the way that they live life, and that it's something that they'll share with their friends. The fact that they watch this video once or twice and they immediately understand that water is important, that's it. That was the whole point of this thing, to get it into the conversation, to make it something that kids are thinking about, talking about, that they're aware of, and that they know is important. This project was self-funded, so we relied on the support of our community to make it happen. It was pretty amazing to just have our neighbors, our friends, and our coworkers come together and volunteer their time and their homes and their kids to make this thing happen. Thanks for checking out the video. Keep the Aquaforce going, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Well, if we learned one thing from last night's debate, it's that it's going to be a long primary season. But hey, that just makes it more fun for us, for you, for this conversation, for democracy. So yay, I say bring it on, bring it on. More debates, more conversations. I'm all for it, huh? How about you? 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. If you want to be part of the conversation in hour 2 of the show, by the way, do tweet us at BP Show or at Igor Volsky. And thank you, as always, for tuning in on Free Speech TV, TawkrTV, DirecTV, and Dish. Couldn't do it without you. Literally could not do it without you. We'd be talking to ourselves if you weren't here. So we're always happy that you join us, that you talk to us, that you tell us what you thought mattered. Do you think this will change the course of the conversation, the course of the election, the course of this primary season? 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. But first, we go to Ayanna Pressley. She's the Boston City Councilor at large, and she's on Twitter at Ayanna Pressley. Ayanna, good morning. Thank you for making the time.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for having me.
What a debate, huh? Look, I thought this was a good, substantive conversation. Got a little heated there at the end when folks tried to make some very clear distinctions. What really stuck out to you? What do you think is the moment that we're going to remember about this debate as we look back on this crazy election, a couple months from now?
Well, I'll say, for myself, what was a clarifying moment, I think Secretary Clinton really emerged with a crystallized message that drew sharp distinction, that she is about breaking down all barriers. She is not running a single-issue campaign because the problems that face us as Americans are not single-issue, that she is prepared and is thoughtfully thought about how to holistically address real problems with real solutions, that she is going to dismantle systemic barriers that are choking at our promise and build ladders of opportunity. I also like to say that I am proud of our party. It certainly was a great sort of fisticuff and finally a real contest of ideas. And so I am celebrating that and what our party and who we have put forward. And I do subscribe and believe with many of the and share many of the beliefs and values that Senator Sanders does. But the issue for me and why I'm vigorously supporting Secretary Clinton is that it's important that we not just offer a vision and an inspiring message, but a plan to back that up.
What really strikes me in that point, right? This contrast that we need more than a vision. We need kind of real experience and know how to realize that vision, which is what Clinton is saying, is that's exactly what she was saying about Obama in 2008. And now she's saying that having that kind of vision and having that kind of 30,000-foot approach, at least during an election, makes sense. And she's hugging President Obama and saying this guy is the greatest. You can't really criticize him. So is that kind of a tension here that the very same criticisms she's making about Bernie, she was making about Obama, and now she's saying that Obama has been a great, great president?
Well, I think some have argued, and very effectively so, that Secretary Clinton is the most prepared to carry on what President Obama has done well and to address the work that has been unfinished.
But do you think it's fair for her to say, like she did last night, and this is what really struck me towards the end of that debate, where she really went after Bernie for criticizing Obama? And to me, the question is, as progressives, as Democrats, don't we want people to kind of criticize and figure out what didn't work and figure out where we need to improve and figure out what Obama did that wasn't so successful?
I think first of all, absolutely. I mean, that is the strength and the beauty of our democracy. Is to ask critical questions and to raise tough issues, and we certainly shouldn't be lemmings. To that point, I would say that it does rub me the wrong way that it seems that many of Senator Sanders' supporters believe there is only one approach to address the problems that face us, and have questioned and have offered, I think, a very unfair litmus test for what it means to be a true and real progressive. That if it were to be, if that were to be so perfectly applied, very few people would be eligible.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think for Senator Sanders to say we should be questioning the president. Well, I think it's fair for us to question Senator Sanders on what real plans he's offering, and. He speaks a lot about sort of the anger that exists amongst Americans, and that anger is very real. And it's been my experience that one of the chief reasons people are apathetic about government has everything to do with a history of broken promises, and especially as we head into southern states with states that are more reflective of America. I will say, as an African American, the two things that I resent the most are when politicians sort of pander, as Paul Begala would say, offer plans without price tags, that's pandering, offer false hope. And when I haven't seen them anywhere and they show up the last Sunday before the election asking and trying to curry my favor and my vote. Secretary Clinton is now going into battlegrounds where these are not just voters to her. These are people for whom she has deep and long relationships and roots based on a decades-long record of commitment to these communities.
Ayanna, I don't mean to interrupt. Let me just jump in here. By the way, it's Ayanna Pressley, Boston City Councilor at Large, joining us on the program. Let's just kind of circle back and close that criticism question. If then it's fair to criticize Obama, where do you see areas that Obama has failed that you think Hillary Clinton has the experience to overcome those challenges and do better than he did? Where specifically?
Well, I'll just say, I think, Congress, the Senate, the president, there was a collective failure there because there's work that's been left on the table, specifically relative to gun control, immigration reform, climate change. I mean, these are things that still need to be addressed. And again, Secretary Clinton is not running a single-issue campaign. That is not to say that I'm very happy that Senator Sanders is in this contest. He has diversified the discourse, and it's important to talk about income inequality. But to the mothers that I talk to on Blue Hill Avenue that are dealing with food insecurity and a son that is incarcerated, and being a caregiver, to a sick parent, I can't tell them that the solution is we're going to address campaign finance reform. That's not what people are talking to me about. What they're talking to me about, if anything, is the vulnerability that they feel in their communities, in their homes. And one of the reasons I'm with Secretary Clinton is because I do believe that she will address gun control, reinstate the assault weapons ban, keep guns out of the hands of violent criminals, stalkers, domestic abusers. And those are all things that are very important to me. And I question Senator Sanders' commitment to do the same. He's voted 5 times against the Brady bill, given immunity to gun manufacturers. So, when I'm on Blue Hill Avenue in Boston, Massachusetts, no one is talking to me about campaign finance reform.
Yeah.
But they are talking to me about violence.
Yeah. No, and that's an important point because the campaign is now moving forward. It's moving to places like Nevada and South Carolina, which are far more reflective of what the country looks like, what the Democratic Party looks like. And Hillary Clinton certainly can speak to those voters in a far better way and persuasive way than Bernie Sanders can and ever has. And I agree. It's completely, I think, discouraging that he really had to be pushed to embrace some of the ideas behind Black Lives Matter, that he had to push and weave those themes into kind of his overarching economic message. But now he has been, which is a good thing. But let me ask you this.
Well, he was in the Congress for 16 years and the Senate for 9. So, he's had a long time and opportunity to speak to and to address these issues. I appreciate his activism and that, he marched and did things as a student activist, but he's had an opportunity to address these issues, to speak to Black America, to be an ally, to be a partner.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen evidence of that. I do want to say to your point about President Obama, I think the issue that Secretary Clinton was really speaking to is that he is running for the Democratic nomination. And it is okay to be critical of the president, of course, but he was critical and encouraged a primary challenger. And that is the sort of rhetoric and action
but what's
that we
wrong?
would
Okay,
expect from a
we
Republican.
can reopen this. What is wrong with a primary challenger? What is wrong with voters having the opportunity to say we either agree with the job you're doing as a Democrat, as a progressive, or we don't? If President Obama was doing such a great job in 2012, that he shouldn't have anything to fear from a primary challenger. I just don't understand this argument of let's have less debates, let's have less discussion, let's have less elections. Why not have more? Shouldn't we want that as progressives?
We welcome debate and contest, and I would argue that, that's what I love about Secretary Clinton in this. I mean, she's not operating with any sense of this. This is not a cakewalk or a coronation. She never thought it was going to be. She's working hard for every vote. She has a 50-state strategy, and you will see that now as we head into South Carolina.
Why is it so wrong for Bernie Sanders to say, I think a candidate should challenge the president from the left because that would force better progressive policies? You just said you're happy to see Bernie Sanders in a competition, electoral competition with Hillary, that makes for a better election, for a better race, for a better candidate, ultimately for a better president. So why couldn't we have that in 2012?
Because he's a sitting president, and I think it weakens the party. It's just, we just fundamentally
But shouldn't it be
disagree.
about the policy? Shouldn't be about those people who you speak to on the street and not about the party?
To be that out in front against a sitting Democratic president and the first African-American president in this country, and I think we've seen a lot of that really unprecedented, almost disrespectful, a challenge lodged against this president. I think,
By Bernie, you think, or by others?
By others. Just collectively, culturally. And I just think it hurts the ballot. So.
Okay, well, look.
And he wasn't a registered Democrat.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. It's just, I think for me, it's just difficult to kind of both argue at the same time that it's great that Bernie's in this race because we can have a real conversation about the issues, and at the same say he's an awful person for suggesting there should be a primary challenge. Fair enough. But
and let me just say at the end of the day, for me, this is it's great to run a campaign to champion a message, but at the end of the day, we are electing the next president of the United States of America. And, I thought it very interesting, again, to get back to that point about Secretary Clinton not running a single-issue campaign on the issue of race relations, where Senator Sanders, said that he might potentially be better at that than President Obama. His response was to address income inequality.
Yeah.
That does not fix racism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so that cannot, I cannot tell the families that I work with every day that are struggling that the answer to the problems that plague them, very complex problems, is to wait for campaign finance reform.
I mean, it was a poor answer. It was a poor answer. I agree with you. But you could also argue that if you look at the criminal justice reforms that both Bernie and Hillary proposed, they're fairly similar. The approach there is fairly similar. Or you look at family economic security issues, the approach there is fairly similar. So it's not as if Bernie doesn't have the kinds of solutions that a Hillary supporter could back. I guess the question is of tactics and where do you start it? Do you start in kind of a more baked-in compromise, as has been Hillary's approach, or do you start with these kind of loftier, grander visions, shoot for the moon, and then when you get into the compromise room, that's where you're able to cut a deal? But I don't think you'd agree with me that it's not fair to say that Bernie doesn't address the kinds of issues that you're saying are important to you and to your constituents.
He raises them. But I have not yet heard from him, and I'll say, specifically when we're talking about Black America, there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of messaging about what we don't want. I have not heard from him a vision for what he does want and a plan for how to get there. Again, Secretary Clinton said she wants to be more than a president. She wants to be a partner. And as a municipal elected official dealing with very complex issues on the local level, an affordable housing crisis, underperforming schools, violence plaguing our communities, that's what I need as a partner, and a partner that is going to offer real plans for real problems. There's nothing wrong with being lofty and aspirational. I'd like to think I'm that too. It's fine to dream big, and we should be bold, but you've got to have bold plans to back up that bold vision.
Anna Presley, she's the Boston City Councilor at Large on Twitter, at Anna Presley. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bill Press Show, we'll be back right after this.
Get social with Bill Press. Like us at facebook.com/Bill Press Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
This is the story of my grandfather. When I was 19 years old, his right hand was crushed in a printing press. He was supposed to lose the hand, but a young doctor saved it just in time for the war. This is the story of the war. My grandfather repaired tanks. Behind the front lines, away from the cameras, he would pull pieces of dead men from the machines and send the machines back out to the field. This is the story of the war a decade later. Back then, you didn't talk about depression. There was no such thing as PTSD. When my uncle, age 7, asked him who won the war, my grandfather said, nobody. This is the story of my grandfather, the machinist. I have a newspaper from 1981, a story about the Nobel Prize for Physics, a photograph of the winner, a Harvard man standing by his machines. This man is not my grandfather. Beneath the photo, my grandfather has written, I designed and built almost everything in this picture. They worked together for 10 years, but my grandmother says the physicist never even remembered his name. If you asked that Harvard man, there would be no story of my grandfather, just a pair of disembodied hands. This is the problem with stories. They have to leave something out. The editor cuts a line and someone's face fades. The editor says 200 words or less and suddenly a whole family goes missing. The spotlight isn't about the light, it's how it makes everything around it dark. My grandfather's face is erased from every story. The machines survive, but the man who made them doesn't. The machines make the photo, but their maker is out of frame. But we choose where to point the camera. We can choose how to tell the story. We can choose which clothing the hero wears. I could tell you this is a story about a soldier, or I could tell you this is a story about the blue-collar man, but really, this is just the story of my grandfather. I did not know him. I was born too late, but my family tells me his name. Alfred Franzosa. I know that name might only live in this moment. that there are other stories with greater stakes, but still, I will tell you his name. I will repair this old machine. I will let my grandfather live again because I could not know him while he was living. Once, when he was younger than I am now, his right hand was crushed by a printing press, crushed by other people's stories. When it healed, he began to build. He used his hands to build tanks and his hands to build cradles. His hands were the last thing to touch dead soldiers and the first to touch his newborn sons. He built a good family, and that family built me, and now I use my hands to build his story. The story is not a eulogy. A eulogy seals the casket. A eulogy lets no air out. This story is a resurrection. Jesus was not resurrected by God. He was brought back by the people who told his stories. It does not take a miracle to raise the dead, to leave behind the tombstone and take the name with you.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
This is the Bill Press Show.
25 minutes after the hour of the Bill Press Show on this special Friday edition, this post-debate Friday edition, where one of the big questions was, can you still be a Democrat in this primary, in this race, if you strongly disagree with President Obama? We just heard from Anna Presley, where we kind of had, a really healthy back and forth, figuring out of what exactly is the risk of saying, yes, Obama should be primary. Now, last night at this debate, Hillary Clinton brought up yet again the fact that Bernie Sanders blurbed Bill's book, Buyer's Remorse, and argued that this suggests that the senator doesn't believe in Obama's legacy.
He's called him a disappointment. He wrote a foreword for a book that basically argued voters should have buyer's remorse when it comes to President Obama's leadership and legacy. And I just couldn't disagree more with those kinds of comments.
Now, the book I have in front of me, Buyer's Remorse, How Obama Let Progressives Down, by Bill Press. You may have heard of him. Some guy named Bill Press. And right here at the top is the blurb. Bill Press makes the case, read this book.
Now, the AP took a look at this. They do a whole rundown of facts and everything after these debates, and they said, on that quote of what she said, he wrote a foreword. The facts are, Sanders did not write a foreword to that book, which is this one that we have here. Instead, he contributed a blurb that's on the back cover and says nothing about Obama. The full blurb is, Bill Press makes the case why, long after taking the oath of office, the next president of the United States must keep rallying the people who elected him or her on behalf of progressive causes. That is the only way real change will happen. So as the AP points out, an out-of-context excerpt of that blurb does not a criticism make. And so Bill went up, Bill was on CNN last night, and he said, look, I wrote the book. I was critical of Obama. Bernie Sanders says nothing about Obama at all.
But she says it fits into this larger narrative that he in the past has criticized Obama, and so it makes sense that he would believe that fair. He is buyer's remorse.
And that's fair too, but to bring him in to make it look like he endorsed the idea that Obama is a bad president in this book is not exactly true.
All right, 28 minutes after the hour, we're going to shift a little bit.
It's okay to
It's
be
okay,
critical.
right? It's okay. Shift a little bit to immigration with Matt Vasilagos from The Atlantic.
This is the Bill Press Show.
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the Rocky Mountains to the deserts, through scorching heat and freezing cold, from the land of the dinosaurs to fields of food.
I lend my hand to 7 states, 2 countries, 9 national parks,
and 36 million people across an arid West.
I am not the strongest or the largest, but I am the hardest working.
People love me.
My playfulness,
My beauty.
my power.
My life. But I don't think I can offer any more.
I am tired.
I am tired,
tapped,
and tied. Of the hundreds of major rivers in the world, I am one of the few who no longer kisses the sea.
Battles to harness my soul have been won and lost. Use me wisely, and I will sustain you.
Use me like you have, and I will break. My name
is
Red. The Grand River Red. The American Nile.
The Canyon Maker. I am the Colorado River.
And I am the most endangered river in America.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Streaming live video right now at youtube.com/TawkrTV. That's TAWKR-TV. This is The Bill Press Show.
33 minutes after the hour, in studio now with Matt Vasilagos, staff correspondent at The Atlantic.
You did it, man.
On Twitter at Matt Vass, Matt V-A-S. And of course, theatlantic.com. Look at that, how I pronounced that.
That was
so
beautiful.
Thank you so
Man,
much.
as a professional. That was
English, my third language. I'll just point out. So the reading and writing sometimes a little difficult. But Matt, thank you so much for being with us. I want to dig into what was a flashpoint at last night's debate, what is a flashpoint for Democrats and for Hispanic voters now with this administration, and that is immigration. And particularly the raids that this president has been conducting since the beginning of the year, 121 families or 121 people who have been raided. This, of course, is based in what the administration says are their deportation priorities. And they argue, Jay Johnson, the Homeland Security chief, I guess you'd call him secretary, would say, we laid out these deportation priorities, that we're not going to deport the dreamers, that we're not going to deport their parents if they fit certain criteria, but we are going to deport people who come into this country illegally, who seek refugee status, aren't granted that status. That's on our list of people to go after. Democrats, many of them in the House, have written letters and made a big fuss about the fact that, look, there's no legal process for these families. And politically, I mean, it's a huge issue in the Latino community. And so if they're worried about raids, they're not going to go canvassing for you and registering voters for you. So you better be careful what you ask for. And therefore, now you have both Bernie and Hillary disagreeing with the administration, breaking with Obama. Oh, here you can break with Obama. By the way, you can break on raids. You can criticize Obama. Can we just note that? On raids. I just realized this. It's okay to criticize Obama. What are the differences, though? Because it feels like it took Hillary, Matt, a little bit to get to this position.
It did, yeah. And, like we were discussing over the break, she at one point did agree with these deportations. When it came time for the election to get Latino support, she came out against it. But here's the thing, though. Latinos haven't forgotten what the president did. And, last time I was on the show, I was in Iowa, and they are very disheartened. They don't believe that the Democratic Party has their back. They see members of the community get deported. They remember ICE raids. It's still very fresh in their minds. They don't show up to ESL classes sometimes because they're afraid that ICE will come and there might be another sort of deportation raid, right? So the Democratic Party needs to do a much better job at telling Latinos, hey, we understand the community, we have your back, and we're not going to do these sort of, these raids again. But how could they believe that when the immigration issue from both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton seems so fluid? I really don't think that voters have seen a very firm, long stance from either candidate.
I mean, teachers in communities with high levels of immigrants are saying, we don't know what to do. We need to bring in lawyers and counselors for these students because their families are freaking out. I mean, I've heard this from multiple teachers in Virginia, in Maryland, saying, "What do we do? How widespread is this? Who's going to be affected?" And it's not as if there's a building where all of the undocumented immigrants live who weren't granted asylum, right? You go into their houses; they live in these mixed legal status families. It's disruptive not just to the individuals. By the way, the families, the mothers and children who you're raiding. But it's also disruptive to the larger community as well.
And that's what I was going to say. So, people like to say that, you're talking about undocumented immigrants. What does that have to do with voting? It's because they're part of a broader community and people see their friends and family members. Okay. So it's all connected here. All right. And so to say that, the two aren't, I mean, that's just not true, and it will affect voting.
And just to ask where you're sending these families to, you're sending them to places like Honduras, like Guatemala, like El Salvador, although I think there's a pause on one of those countries, but definitely some of them are going to El Salvador, where you have clear documentation from The Guardian of at least 3 cases where people were sent back and killed within months because they're coming over, they're fleeing gangs, they're fleeing violence. That's why they're here. And the fact that that's not recognized, then you're just very coldly saying, well, we're following the law. If that's what the law says, is a big problem.
Yeah, but I think people need to see what it actually looks like on the ground. And so I just got back from Chicago at the end of last year. And in the 2 months before I got to the city, so in October and November, 10,000 unaccompanied minors crossed the border into Mexico. All right, that's 10,000 children.
Yeah.
All right, and so they're going all over the country, and they're also going to Chicago, where they'd have no room for them. There's 9 centers that are holding undocumented or unaccompanied minors in the city, and they really don't have enough funding. They're overflooded. And then once those kids on their 18th birthday, once they turn 18, they're sent into a detention center. They're thrown into a jail in the Chicago area, and ICE doesn't have their own detention centers. They rent from county jails. So these kids who are fleeing terror, who are fleeing poverty and gun violence, are put into a into a jail uniform and thrown into a cell on their 18th birthday. And that's the situation that you see just in that city, and it's happening all across the country. And there's not many solutions out there. I mean, I highlight a solution. We can talk about that later. But the point is, the system's broken. There are children and asylum seekers, not just from Central America, but from Eritrea and Somalia and Pakistan, who fled terror, couldn't get refugee status to the UN, so they show up at O'Hare Airport, or they cross the border through Mexico just to find some sort of semblance of a normal life. And the system is so backed up, there are no immigration judges. The jails and detention centers are so flooded, these people who are fleeing a terrible life are put into jail uniforms and put behind bars.
And you know what's not progressive? That.
Yeah.
That right there is not progressive.
That's the thing that I have such a hard time with when we talk about these stories, right? Is there are a lot of politicians who want to fix it. There are a lot of people who see this, they say they want to fix it, but the fix seems so far off. Like no one's really willing to say and put out there that to really get this fixed, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money.
A ton of money. We need more judges. You need more facilities. I mean, the whole point of having these folks and giving them some sort of status is to integrate them into American society. We shouldn't be jailing them. I mean, obviously we've talked about this plenty. Our jails are already flooded for multitudes of reasons. Do we need to really throw an Eritrean woman who's pregnant into a Cook County jail, Jesus, which is who I talked to there? They put her in jail because she had a court case 3 years down the line. All right. And then, she got more and more pregnant, and then she became ill, and ICE officials were petrified that they were going to have another situation where a pregnant asylum seeker or undocumented immigrant had some sort of issue. I was on the program a few months ago talking about a woman in Nashville who had to give birth under ICE control, shackled to her hospital bed at the arms and the legs while she gave birth, right? Wow. So do they really want another situation like that? What? You remember that one? Yeah. Oh. And so this woman I talked to in Chicago, she was headed toward that situation, and she got sick, and ICE officials decided to release her to an outside facility. So here's the solution. The government our government is already overrun, and it has too much, it has too many issues to handle, more judges, more jails, all the things. So we need to look to outside groups like the one I highlight, which is a home for 20 people on a floor in some seminary school in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago. They give them a bus pass, they give them all free food, they give them a room, they give them English classes. So they can actually go to work, apply for work authorization. They could go to work, get enough money so they can hire an immigration lawyer and get their status. And they're not just sitting in a jail cell for 3 years waiting.
Well, this sounds like it could work in some areas of the country where there's those kinds of services available. Right. I mean, but is that kind of a broad solution that you could apply across the...
I think that they have created a model that can be replicated. It is not cheap to hold people in jail, okay? So the folks that I talked to in Chicago at this House of Hospitality, it's through a place called the Interfaith, a community of interfaith people who like undocumented immigrants. Yeah. I forgot the
that's their name. People who like undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, that's terrible. I forgot their name. But basically they have set up a model that is a lot cheaper than the model that the federal government has.
Do you know how much cheaper it is?
I mean, enough so that ICE is turning to them now.
So the recommendation is you funnel some of the money that you would have used to lock up these immigrants towards groups that can provide them services where they can live a life until their immigration process is sorted out in the courts.
Absolutely. So instead of keeping them in jail for 3 years.
Because they're not criminals. Because
Right.
it's not as if they mugged someone or killed someone or took something. I mean, they came here because they couldn't stay where they were. They wanted a better life for their family.
Right. So instead of putting them into, so we're talking about asylum seekers and nonviolent undocumented immigrants, okay? You take them out of a jail where you have to provide, these 3 meals a day, all the services, right? And then you put them into a facility that they can go out and they can get a job. And really all you're providing them is a nice place to live, a bus pass, and some sort of peace of mind so they can get on their feet, right? I mean, like, if we're talking about asylum seekers and integrating them into American society, what is a better process? You putting them in jail or letting them figure it out, and being part of American society?
All right, well, Bernie, Hillary, are you listening? We'll send him the clip of this.
Yes, for sure.
And the friends of the undocumented immigrants.
And your article as well.
Yeah.
Matt Vassalagambro's staff correspondent at The Atlantic on Twitter at Matt Vass. He'll be here to criticize me for mispronouncing his name again, and we'll see you on the other side of this break.
Follow us on Twitter at BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
It occurred to me tonight, for the first time, that the long-winged insect that over and over again rams its body into the wood of my front door might not know what he's doing. He might not have a plan. Maybe that's just how he flies, and that is where the door is. And I remember you. The last time I saw you, a few weeks before we would graduate from high school, and a few days before you let a bullet dissolve on your tongue, dancing in a warehouse rave, sweat-drenched and strobe light battered, thrashing your arms back and thrusting them forward. The floor could get so bright and loud, we all slowed down to be more careful, but you kept dancing full sprint tornado, and sometimes you'd spin full weight into a wall and just spread your arms against it and sway back and forth like a lover reunited. This long-winged insect is not trying to get into the house. It doesn't know there is a house. Can't imagine a life beyond that door. All it can see is the light. You and I were both 17 when you died. And ever since then, I have envied you. How you are remembered for towering, unclaimed potential instead of living to look regret in the face. You didn't have to come home 3 weeks later and explain to your little brother why you took too much medicine. Your addiction is remembered as a tragedy, not a betrayal. Your suicide attempt became a suicide, not an unpaid hospital bill. And only tonight did it occur to me that maybe that night when you let your teeth touch metal, you might not have known what you were doing. You might not have had a plan. Maybe you had hit that door so many times you couldn't imagine it might let you through. I'm still ashamed to admit it, but I have always secretly believed you did it for me, that you wanted to show me that there is a way out of all of this. Not so that I would follow you, but so I would understand that every day that I am alive is a day that I choose to be alive. And when the music stops, you still get to keep on dancing. And when the light is so bright it blinds, you can dance with your eyes closed. And if in that dark you come up against a wall, you keep your arms out wide and you dance with the wall.
on your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
48 minutes after the hour of The Bill Press Show for this Friday, February 12th, 2016. Matt Lagambros, the staff correspondent at The Atlantic, continues here with us discussing the very important question, the crisis that we're facing of asylum seekers from Central America, some other countries, coming across the border, and how do we treat them? And what does that say about us, that we lock them up, that they're in these detention centers for a long, long time, that we don't give them the legal representation they need to properly make their asylum claims? Both Bernie and Hillary have condemned Obama in this regard, but the administration doesn't appear to be slowing down, defending their raids, saying that it fits within their broader priority definitions for who they're going to deport. Jose from Chicago now joins the show. Jose, good morning.
Good morning. I just want to comment on, I don't know how Hillary Clinton can count on the Latino vote when she's wrapping herself around the deporter-in-chief. A lot of people don't like Barack Obama, Latinos, because they see him as a person that betrayed us, The last year deporting a lot of people, he has deported more people than any other president. So I don't know how she thinks it's going to help her with the Latino base, because a lot of people that I talk to, cousins, uncles, aunts, friends, they're disenfranchised by the Democrats because of what Barack Obama is doing,
This is a really great point. I mean, this is an angle on this that cuts really to whether or not she's going to be able to bring this coalition out that she needs.
It is. And then this is the point that I see on the ground, talking to Latino voters, is that they do not believe in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
They have been, they came out in force to vote for President Obama in the last two elections. And then they saw all these deportations and they thought, what did we really vote for? And so if we trusted the president, should we actually trust Bernie Sanders or Secretary Clinton? And should those two candidates really talk about immigration a little more, right? And when they're in certain states like New Hampshire or Iowa, shouldn't they be talking about immigration the same way they talk about it in Nevada?
Well, let's talk about this immigration point, because here is actually, I think, a vulnerability for Bernie in many respects. I mean, as Jose pointed out, there's a problem here with this piece about how close do you get to what some consider deporter-in-chief. But what happens when it's brought out far more fully, I think, the fact that he didn't oppose the 2007 immigration reform effort, that he is very concerned with this idea that immigrants displace workers here in the United States, white blue-collar workers who make up his constituency in Vermont. I mean, he hasn't been the friendliest when it comes to this issue.
It's a new issue for him. I mean, these progressive policies that we see from him, I mean, I'm not going to go as far as like we talked about Steve King, the congressman from Iowa, saying that his immigration views are very much like mine. That is not true. That is not true, okay? But immigration is a newish issue for him and these progressive policies. And so voters really have to look at it and wonder, when push comes to shove, is he really going to act on these certain positions?
Hal from Kensington, Maryland. Good morning.
Hey, Bernie's definitely better on immigration. First of all, you talked about the drive for immigrants. The push from Latin America. He supports legalizing marijuana. He supports ending the drug war. The drug war is a huge factor in the crime rates that are pushing people out of Latin America. He's against the free trade deals that have impoverished so many, small farmers and agriculture in that region, also driving immigration to this country. He, unlike Clinton, was against the raids before. He was not ever for them before he was against them. And he has taken positions against some immigration that does displace American workers, such as the H-1B visas. I think that's how you pronounce them, HB1 visas, where
that's a contentious issue, though. I mean, you can't just proclaim that it's going to displace workers. I mean, I think the research there shows that we're talking about different jobs, that the immigrants who are coming in are doing jobs that Americans don't want to do, that if there's displacement, it's small. Matt, final word.
Right, and I think you make a really strong point, the caller does. And I think the only follow-up would be, looking back at some of his votes and seeing the newness that he's, how he's been talking about now as opposed to back then, right? If we're looking at records, if we're judging people on votes, I think that's the thing that voters have to keep in mind.
And it's going to be a long race, so he'll have a long time to perfect that rhetoric. Matt Vasilagambros, staff correspondent at The Atlantic on Twitter, at Matt Vass, theatlantic.com. Matt, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
We'll be back right after this.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
I have never felt so at ease as the day you called me precocious. I have never feared big words, only those that refuse to use them, and the syllables rolled off your tongue like honey. I was hooked. Language became our vein of communication, and I know that everybody uses language to communicate, but ours was different. As if in between the letters and the syllables there is a secret message only we could decipher. My days were filled with the sound of your voice, and your nights were littered with the loops of my handwriting. We exchanged our favorite words, mine being illuminated and yours being cattywampus. And our least favorites, mine moist and yours almost. And when I asked you why, you said it was because almost held failed potential, that it represented our ability to be just not good enough, that we had come to the brink of something beautiful but fell short so many times we crafted a word for it. But even we, with our supposed mastery of the English language, were not immune to the shortcomings of our vocabularies. Words can only help you if you speak them. I never told you that I loved you. You never told me that you were dying. 5 easy words that would have shattered our worlds. I love you, I think. I have a brain tumor. Still to this day, I don't know all the details because medical jargon has never fit right in my mouth. And even now, 5 years later, it feels like an invasion of your privacy. But I do know I have pored over our conversation, searching for the secret message you certainly tried to send me, and I am sorry. But I only almost found it. Salt water is not good for paper, and my tears warped your words. After some serious consideration, I've decided to change my least favorite word, because while moist is gross, malignant is malicious. Malignant is uncontrollable, means a phone call and the phrase, he didn't wake up. Malignant is messy and unfair and a thief. Malignant means I never got to say goodbye. Malignant is the cause of almost. Because you were on the brink of something beautiful, but you couldn't quite reach it, and you fell too far. I am so sorry I wasn't there to catch you. I hope your heaven is a library, and I hope it is void of almosts. Te amo, Daniel. Sleep well.
Y'all like that poem? Say hell yeah.
This is the Bill Press Show.
57 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show, moving slowly along, quickly along in the most interesting of ways into hour 3 of this debate analysis as we dissect who won, who lost, what are the big issues that primary voters are focused on, what will drive them to the polls, who will drive them to the polls, and of course, what approach to governance. The contrast is pretty stark. Hillary laid it out. She said, look, I can actually get things done. I think changes happen through laws, and I know how to get those laws passed. Bernie's saying, I want to appeal to your heart about dreaming what's possible, what we can accomplish, but does he have the ability to actually get it done, to make that law that will change that life, that will make America a better, more equal, progressive country? That's the big question in this election, and we'll answer it next with Daniela Gibbs-Leger of the Center for American Progress Action Fund when we come back. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
The hardest moments for me is when I'm laying awake in the middle of the night and I'm thinking about all the times I made a pitcher of Kool-Aid with the water, or I boiled a pot of corn or potatoes with the water. Those thoughts just stick with me in the middle of the night, and I feel horrible as a mom that I didn't know that something was wrong, but how could I have known? There's no way I would have known.
The spill at Dan River happened when a drainage pipe that ran underneath an ash basin and dam collapsed, sucking out 6 decades of waste and spewing gunk directly into the river.
My husband and I just kind of looked at each other like, should we be concerned? We live right next to an ash pond, and this was coal ash spilling into the Dan River, and we learned at that point all of the toxins that were included in coal ash.
A situation like Dan River, where there was a catastrophic disaster, gets people's attention, but the fact is that these coal ash pits have been leaking and poisoning people's groundwater and the state's surface waters for decades. Coal ash is the residue left behind after coal is burned in a coal-fired power plant. A large coal-fired power plant can burn 10 million tons of coal a year. When the organic matter in the coal is burned away, what's left behind are these trace minerals, things like arsenic, lead, mercury, selenium, and chromium. And these are highly concentrated. The coal ash can have concentrations of these contaminants that are 10 to 100 times greater than the level in the coals themselves.
Coal ash pond number 1 is right behind my house, literally pretty much in my backyard. We were approached by a neighbor who was wanting to have their well tested, and we decided that maybe we should have ours tested as well. They found hexavalent chromium at 4.5 parts per billion.
So in talking to the residents, we have discovered anecdotal evidence of an extraordinary number of cancers for this fairly small community.
Some of us in the community got together. We started kind of talking about all the cancer that we've seen in some of our family friends in this community. I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of around 70 names. So we had some help from our river keepers putting a map together, and it was a little shocking to see it. You know, I still have a hard time looking at it.
Technically, EPA has not regulated coal ash as a hazardous waste, but it is undeniable that coal ash contains many, many hazardous substances that are hazardous, in fact, to people and the environment. And the only reason they have not been regulated as such is because of intense lobbying efforts by the coal industry and its allies.
A lot of these chemicals are simple elements, but when you find them at the levels that they exist in around coal ash ponds, then you're starting to talk about cancer, brain tumors, you're talking about birth defects, developmental problems, neurotoxicity.
we began to look at legal options, cases that we could bring in court to protect communities and their citizens from these toxic leaking time bombs. In 2002, North Carolina enacted a public financing mechanism for judicial elections. This kept private money out of judicial elections.
The repeal of the public financing program in judicial elections in North Carolina creates a dangerous precedent for all, and it gives corporate polluters and other special interests the opportunity to elect the judges that they want. And this is important for us all. Everyone should care about this, because when you think about the fact that the state and the federal government have basically abdicated their responsibility to regulate these issues, the state courts are the last stopgap.
I think this is no longer a problem that's going to go under the radar. It has been exposed, and I am confident that we will ultimately, with the facts, win out and ensure that we have protected waterways.
And so this is something that we all should care about. If we're worried about the water we drink and the air we breathe, we have to be concerned about money in judicial elections.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
So the big question this morning is, what did you think? Who do you think won? Who lost? Who could have done better? And what are the issues that are animating this race on the Democratic side? Let us know. And good morning to you. Igor Volsky here of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, filling in for Bill Press. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We do want to hear from you as we move now into hour 3 of debate, analysis, and dissection. Getting it all out there. That's what I believe in. Put everything on the table, figure out what works, run with that, and the stuff that doesn't work, get rid of it. That's what's going to make us a better country. That's what's going to make us more progressive. That's what's going to help the people who need help the most. I need a lot of help when I do this show, and so I've brought in some great talent. Peter Ogburn is here. Talented man. Talented man.
Great talent.
Jamie Benson's here.
Using air quotes around
lots of air quotes.
I felt there were air quotes.
No air quote needed.
Yeah, that's right. Ray Rogers is screening your calls, and Cyprian Bolding is our video operator, making us look so good on youtube.com/TawkrTV, on Free Speech TV, on DirecTV, and Dish. And of course, the real talent here this morning is Daniela Gibbs-Leger. She's the Center for American Progress's Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategy. And really, I say this every time because it's true, is a must follow on Twitter at DGibber123. DGibber123. It's really just one of my favorite accounts.
Thank you. I try just for you.
Yes.
I co-sign that. Real life retweet. I think and you can see it as an endorsement.
From politics to Kanye.
Yeah.
She covers it all.
I do cover it all. Yes.
So we're going to get into the debate. Get your take, Daniela, on what you think worked, what didn't work. But first...
This is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of other stories making news. So Ted Cruz has a new ad out. I should say had a new ad out. It's called Conservatives Anonymous, and it shows these conservatives in the spot that are sort of, it's like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where they're talking about who they're going to support and all that. It's sort of a target at Marco Rubio. It's a very interesting ad. There's an actress in it named Amy Lindsay, and BuzzFeed took a look to see what else Amy Lindsay had acted in.
As one would.
Naturally.
She has acted in movies such as Erotic Confessions, Carnal Wishes, Secrets of a Chambermaid, and Insatiable Desires. All softcore porn movies that's now the star of the Ted Cruz ad targeting Marco
But
Rubio.
isn't this what Ted Cruz would want? People branching out of that kind of entertainment and moving into other, what he probably sees as more legitimate jobs in the industry. I think he should bring her back. He should bring this
Well,
this is an example
that's
of
not
success.
going to happen.
He created a job for her, and then he took it away.
Exactly.
Yeah, no longer a job creator. The ad has been completely removed. It's no longer out there. He deleted all references to it from his Twitter. So she is a ghost now, as far as Ted Cruz is concerned. Yesterday, this is something else, man. Yesterday, on the floor of the House, during an e-cigarette hearing, they were sort of having a hearing to see about e-cigarettes and whether or not they're harmful and what they can do. Congressman Duncan Hunter Jr. actually pulled out his vape pen and started vaping on the floor of the House. During the hearing, he was trying to show how safe it is. He says, this here is a vaporizer. There's no combustion. There's no carcinogens. And then he exhaled a large white cloud.
I know a lot about e-cigs. I did a deep dive into them about 3 years ago, and I'll tell you the biggest problem is we don't know what's in them because it's not regulated.
That's true.
We don't know what the chemicals will do to you because there hasn't been any long-term studies.
I'd love to know what's in them. Sure.
Exactly. Also, another reason to not like Duncan Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, like, we needed another reason, right? And New York Fashion Week is underway, and so they had a huge rollout for New York Fashion Week. It got a little hot and heavy, as it were. What they did is they set up a desert-themed presentation of a show, complete with sand and like a backdrop that looked like the desert, and they had turtles, like tortoises, right? Like all around, walking around. You had to be careful you didn't step on the tortoises, except there were male turtles and there were female turtles, and the turtles, well, yeah. Okay. The turtles did what they do in nature in front of everybody during Fashion Week. And they just sort of went at it in front of everybody. Page 6 has all of the photos that you might want to see. Some of them in SFW. So I'll tweet out a link if you want to go see the whole. It's hilarious because it's models walking around and, you know, all these, and then they're just turtles just going at it right behind them. It's amazing.
They don't care about Fashion Week, these turtles.
No.
Anywhere.
Where is the respect?
Exactly.
Honestly.
Respect
For the
privacy,
fashion,
please.
for the art.
Yeah.
Well, Daniela, the other reason why I'm very excited to have you here is because this is the last day in this studio as you see it.
Ooh.
Because minutes after you and I go on air, Jamie is going to single-handedly transform this studio into a much more beautiful, more modern space.
That's actually happening. That's actually happening.
With lots of beer.
We're ready to, like, this stuff here. We're just going to.
My!
I should probably not take it down yet, but we're taking it all down, man. It's coming down.
So I'm saying if there's a souvenir you want to take with you to the office, maybe you want to take a little bit of the foam.
Yeah, maybe some foam.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna take all of this blue soundproofing foam and we're gonna cut it up into little pieces and sell it the way that people sold pieces of the Berlin Wall. Right?
Yeah.
You'll see the museums
There's
everywhere.
definitely a
little
market
foam
for that.
pieces, right?
Yeah.
Or like what they do when they tear down an old baseball stadium, right? Like a little piece of the turf.
It's like a seat, but foam.
That's it. Exactly. Exactly.
Maybe if you buy Bill's book, you get a little piece of the foam.
We're gonna have all new microphones here, new mics, right? These stands are gonna be gone. right? So it's
See, I'm afraid that once they do this, they won't let me in because it's going to be too fancy and too
nice.
high end, too
Well,
nice.
I mean, I can see why you're afraid of that.
Yeah,
jacket and tie will be required for gentlemen to enter the studio.
Oh, wow.
Let that be known.
Okay.
So.
Clearly. Well, Daniela, you watched the debate last night. It was the 6th Democratic debate. I think the second where it was just Hillary and Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think? I mean, this campaign, now that it's the two of them, is an interesting territory. They're both fighting to be the progressive voice. There's this weird notion that you can't criticize Obama, but you can criticize him on immigration raids, by the way, I just learned, but nothing else. Tell me your kind of gut here on what the dynamic is and what it means for the race moving forward.
So I thought last night's debate was good. Again, just a contrast between what you see on the Democratic side and the Republican side. Like, I think Chris Eliza tweeted out saying, "Is it just me or is this debate going so long?" I'm like, "Oh, it's so bad when we debate policy and have a substantive conversation. God forbid."
God forbid.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. And also, it's great for progressives when the uber argument is who is more progressive.
Yes.
I think
who
that
will provide universal coverage? Who will
Right.
go the furthest in providing universal
like that
coverage?
is a phenomenal thing and much better than some of the debates we've had in the past presidential cycles. I thought Hillary did a great job. I think coming off of a pretty tough loss for her in New Hampshire, I thought she was measured. I thought she was passionate. I thought her delivery was great. I thought she was substantive, but also I thought she bought in the more personal when she was telling stories. I thought she did a really good job. It's not to say I think Sanders didn't do a good job also. I thought he stumbled on a couple of things. I think sometimes he's a little one-dimensional in his delivery. But overall, I thought, like, if you're a Democrat and you watched that debate last night, like, you should have been happy with what you saw.
Yeah.
He did have a weird moment where they asked him, how would a Sanders presidency help heal some of the racial divide we've seen?
Yeah.
And he didn't really have a good answer. And so he talked about the economy and closing the wage gap and bringing everybody up, which is fair, but it doesn't really speak to the issue.
It doesn't speak to the issue. It didn't answer the question. And it's a problem that I've seen with him in this type of question before. And he's got to figure out a better answer to it. Like, there are lots of problems and issues in the African American community among people of color. But the question was specifically about healing racial divides, and like jobs is not going to solve all the problems. I mean, Hillary Clinton laid it out in probably what I think is her best explanation for the systematic racism and structural racism that exists in this country. And he needs to come up with his own version of that answer, because to every time say, well, how are you going to fix, racism or racial, injustices? Well, it's Wall Street and it's jobs. That's a small part of it. It's not all of it.
What else do you think he should be addressing?
I mean, and he does, that's the problem. Like, he does talk about it in other instances, but for some reason, he can't talk about it when it's asked this question directly. I mean, he needs to talk about, like, what's happening in schools and education and the school to prison pipeline and, the disparities in housing and how that all, interacts with somebody's life. And then they end up, interacting with the criminal justice system. Like, all of that is unfortunately tied together in a lot of communities. And I don't understand why he can sort of talk about it in bits and pieces, but when he's directly asked the racial question, he reverts back to just talking about jobs and the economy.
He has those puzzle pieces, but he doesn't put them together to form a picture.
Yeah.
And that's probably, I've been saying this all show, it feels like it's because he's never had to.
I think that's right. He's never had to. When you think about his career, I don't know that he's really been super challenged in any of his races before. And, this is a big national spotlight, and I guess maybe he just needs some time to sort of cook a little bit.
Let me push back a bit on some of the Hillary stuff, because I thought she too had a strong performance, but I didn't really understand the strategy behind Henry Kissinger. And I get that the Hillary approach here is to say, look, you may disagree with somebody, but this is a person who has done this for a very long time and who has certain insights that we can benefit from as we try to govern. Right. There's some sense to that, absolutely. But it seems to feed into this critique that Bernie Sanders has that you can't trust Hillary's judgment, that her instincts on these things, particularly in the foreign policy realm, are wrong. And he, of course, brings up the Iraq vote.
Right.
But doesn't that help him make the case when she says Henry, Henry, Henry?
I think it does, unfortunately for them. I mean, I understand what she's saying. It's hard to make nuanced points sometimes in debates, in primary elections. And, did everything that Henry Kissinger do, was everything horrible? Like, obviously not. But overall, when people think about him, they're not left with like a very warm, rosy feeling. So it's really hard to say, well, yeah, I listened to like 0.5% of what he says because, that was smart and good, but that's not what people are hearing. So again, I feel like sometimes she does this, and maybe it's just some really smart people get really tripped up in their heads sometimes.
Yeah.
And like, this is not the election for that to happen. Like, you've got to like start speaking to people here, and Henry Kissinger is not quite the way to do that.
One of the things that I keep hearing, whether it's about Bernie making his case completely and putting everything together, or Hillary getting her message out as clearly as she would like, is that these are good problems to have right now. Yeah. Comparatively speaking, right? And this is a theme we've been talking about all day, is like, it's okay to disagree with other people within the party, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's a pretty wide pendulum swing of ideas that are okay for progressives and liberals. And I don't like how it's become, like, you cannot disagree with my candidate, or like, if you don't like my candidate, we can't get along, or we have to fight about this. And I'm not saying that either one of the candidates are responsible. It's just politics have caught up a little bit, I think, with two really good, smart, thoughtful people who are right on a lot of the issues. Right?
But that's why it bothers me when Hillary spent so much time going after Bernie for disagreeing with the president. I mean, it's been animated by Bill's book, but I just don't get. And you know what? I think the problem here is that it doesn't come across as authentic. Like, I don't really believe that Hillary really believes that Obama's been this perfect president, and there's nothing for us to build on from his failures or to learn from his failures. And I think if you'd ask him, he'd say, "Here's where I failed. Here's where I failed, and here's what I would do differently. And I recommend that you do that differently as the next president, whoever you may be," right? So if her problem is Bernie comes across as this kind of very legit, believable, non-politician kind of guy, when she gets up there and she's such a smart and thoughtful person and says things like, well, you just can't disagree with him, it doesn't help her cause.
So I am of a different mind of this. I mean, obviously, she has said in the past where she's disagreed with him. So you're right. Like, she would fail her own purity test if that's the case. I think the issue with Bernie, that maybe, and I don't know, I'm not personal friends with Hillary Clinton, so I don't know exactly what she's thinking. But when I talk to some of my friends who are her supporters, and when we hear some of the things he says, it can come across from Bernie as if President Obama, not that he hasn't done anything great, but that there's a critique that comes out of him that just feels wrong. And I'm not articulating it very well. It's because I haven't had any coffee this morning, and I could have had coffee, but I asked for water
instead. Has Peter not given you any?
No, I asked for water instead, which was like this really bad move on my part.
You can get your coffee.
It's okay.
Get Danielle coffee, like now.
Stat! A little Bailey's in it. Just kidding.
Not really.
But I think there is a way that he is trying to not separate himself from the president, but show how he'd be a different president that is coming across as being a little bit too harsh of Obama and all that he has done and all that he has accomplished. And look, I think politically it's smart for her to do this because obviously President Obama is the most popular politician, in the Democratic Party. And as you're moving to South Carolina and places with a higher African-American voter participation, he is extremely popular amongst my peoples. So like, I can understand why she's doing it. I think I do agree with you that it can be a little better, I think, her critique, because it doesn't make sense to say like you have to agree with everything that Obama does, because obviously there are many areas where she is even saying, look, the ACA is great and I don't want to like tear it down, but we need to like add on it because it's not enough.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back to this because it sounds like you're saying there's a little bit of like, I'm a white man kind of sense here, because he got a lot of charges on Twitter for being maybe a little too patronizing with her. Then there's this piece as well. We're going to take a break. We're going to discuss this, dig into it more. I'm Igor Volsky, sitting in for Bill Press. Back in a moment.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Today, in this country, we are having a conversation about police violence, the killing of black men, and what all that means. It is sad that this is happening and that every day there's a new incident to cause us to keep thinking about it and talking about it. But it is extraordinary that the American people are having to deal with this every day, whether you're watching CNN or MSNBC, Fox, or ABC News. All the news channels are talking about police violence and what does that mean against black people. Many people probably look at that, certainly have looked at it in the past, and they have said that these poor black men are doing bad things, and that's why they are ending up in confrontations with police without any understanding of the lives of these poor black young men. Part of what has been going on for decades is that poor black people live in communities that suffer from hyper-surveillance of the police. The police are more likely to be in their communities. The police are more likely to arrest them. The police are more likely to stop them even if they're not doing anything. And that is what is so hard for the American people to believe, that you would get stopped and searched and arrested by the police and not doing anything. But this is starting to come out as people are telling the stories over and over again. But this has been the condition, this hyper-surveillance by police, making it more likely for people to get a record, to be known by the police, and then once they get in the system, it is almost impossible to get out because of the whole system of being on parole and missing an appointment or fraternizing with a person who has a criminal record, getting you right back in the jail, and then going back again and again and again. This is coming to be seen by the American people in a way that it has never been seen before. But why are people in these communities in the first place? That's getting peeled away. People are there because of housing discrimination. They are there because this is the only place where affordable housing can be found. They are there because that's where their families live, and people are drawn to being in communities where they are comfortable. The combination keeps people in these low-income communities where they are an easy target for hyper-surveillance and then everything that comes from it. And so as we think about these issues, we have to understand that while you as an individual in this society, as a white individual, you may not carry personal racism, but that does not keep the system from operating in a racist way.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 27 minutes after the hour, continuing with Daniela Gibbs-Leger, the Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategy at the Center for American Progress, a colleague of mine, but I can't pronounce her title.
It's fine.
Daniela. Before the break.
That was a that's fine, which meant it's not fine.
She's like, you're going to hear about this.
Yeah, and
when
you
we
will.
go back to the office.
Your office is just 2 doors away from me.
Make you write on your whiteboard, until it fills up. Before the break, we were talking about the sense that sometimes Bernie can be too dismissive very quickly. Do you think that's a problem for him?
Yeah, I do.
That was very quick.
You said very
that
quickly.
Was very
she
quick.
nailed it.
Well, all right,
she nailed
it. Thank you. Daniela Gibbs-Leger, Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategy at the Center for American Progress at DGibber123. Best follow on Twitter.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Control. This is
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the Rocky Mountains to the deserts, through scorching heat and freezing cold, from the land of the dinosaurs to fields of food.
I lend my hand to 7 states, 2 countries, 9 national parks,
and 36 million people across an arid West.
I am not the strongest or the largest, but I am the hardest working.
People love me.
My playfulness,
My beauty.
my power,
My life. But I don't think I can offer any more.
I am tired.
I am tired,
tapped,
and tied. Of the hundreds of major rivers in the world, I am one of the few who no longer kisses the sea.
Battles to harness my soul have been won and lost. Use me wisely, and I will sustain you.
Use me like you have, and I will break. My name
is
Red. The Grand River Red. The American Nile.
The Canyon Maker. I am the Colorado River.
And I am the most endangered river in America.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Streaming live video right now at youtube.com/TawkrTV. That's TAWKR-TV. This is The Bill Press Show.
33 minutes after the hour of The Bill Press Show, rounding out the last half hour on this Friday, February 12th, 2016, the day after the debate. And it's the moment, the great moment you've all been waiting for, where we have some other guy named Igor joining us now on our newsmaker line, because he's a newsmaker. Igor, hi. Igor.
Good morning.
Igor,
I'm Igor Babic
Igor
joins
Babic,
us,
the associate...
a.k.a. the superior Igor, because he did beat you in Igor versus
just
Igor.
Just once, though. Just once.
If I may add, newsmaker and thought leader.
Oh,
Thought
yes.
leader.
Wow. Yes,
and
wow.
thinkfluencer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Igor, thank you for joining us. I mean, you're not in studio, but you're on the phone, so I guess that's all right. Let me. I heard you've been on the road. You may be a little tired from covering the circus that is the Republican primary, and I want to go through just some of the changes that we've seen in the last couple of days. The shakeups. Chris Christie, my hometown governor, out. A big Christie donor going to John Kasich, who's still in and seems to have more life in his campaign after his second place finish in New Hampshire. Is this Kasich thing a real thing, or are we not going to hear from him after this?
I think he's going to face a very difficult time right now. His campaign has basically given up on South Carolina before the show's even gotten on the road. You know, he's running some ads there, but he's polling at 2%, and really they've just basically admitted that they're heading to Michigan already. He's a more moderate establishment guy, and he's looking downfield to blue states like Michigan, like Ohio, like Minnesota, where he could potentially do somewhat better. The problem for him is that he doesn't have as much money as the other guys. You know, he raised something like $8 million in the last fundraising quarter. Ted Cruz got 20. So he's gonna face some trouble trying to keep up that fundraising pace. But he did get some good news in recent days. He bagged one of these big GOP whales, basically a mega donor, who backed Chris Christie, who now backed out. Ken Langone is a co-founder of Home Depot. He hasn't really contributed a lot to this race, but if he sees that Kasich is his guy and can do well, he's probably going to help keep him afloat. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
And Igor, we're also joined in studio by Daniela Gibbs-Leger, also from CAP. Daniela, talk to this notion that John Kasich is more moderate. Like, I get that he's more moderate in tone and presentation, yes, but you take a look at some of those policies, I don't know how much more moderate he is than the rest of the guys.
Yeah, he's really not. And I think it just goes to show how, if I may use the term crazy, things are on the Republican side, that somebody who has been, fighting to get rid of unions, who is about to sign a bill that will defund Planned Parenthood, and if you tick down the list on progressive issues, has been pretty horrible, is considered moderate. Now, yes, he has, done and said some really great things around poverty, but, that doesn't make you a moderate. It makes you less crazy than everybody else who's running.
Igor, is that what he's pointing to on the campaign trail? And is he making that contrast clear? Is this his lane, the moderate lane that he sees in the primary?
I think relatively so, compared to Trump and compared to Cruz. But it was funny. It's funny, he was on the campaign trail actually in South Carolina yesterday, and a woman stood up and asked him, I don't have health insurance right now. Basically told him that she is uninsured and, suffering. And he told her, I basically quoting him, I don't know why you don't have health insurance, but there is a program out there that might be able to help you. And, without saying the word, he was kind of implicating himself there. But it was interesting to see that in a state like South Carolina, which didn't expand Medicaid, his state, Ohio, where he did expand Medicaid, kind of the politics there are stacked against him, unfortunately, given that he did expand Medicaid, but that's kind of an issue that's painted him negatively within the party.
And it's also fascinating, Igor, and you would know this better than us here on the trail, that Obamacare is not really an issue this election. I mean, yeah, they all want to repeal and get rid of it on day one, but it's not animating the race. Is that in fact true? And is that because you have voters who are going to these town halls, going to these events, and maybe some of them are on Obamacare, and so it's kind of awkward then for these politicians to say, I'll take it away from you?
You know, it's ironic that for the second time in 4 years, you've got a candidate who supported government-sponsored health care win the New Hampshire primary, and of course I'm talking about Mitt Romney here. So I think voters are voting, for persona and bombast and I guess leadership qualities is what they see in Trump over, whether position that he might hold might hew further left on Social Security and issues like that. So it's really somewhat of a striking contrast.
Daniela, let me allow you to get a word in here between two Igors. The other big change that we saw after the debate is Marco Rubio, who of course had a huge gaffe in the last Republican debate where he just repeated something 4 times and then came in, 5th in New Hampshire? Is that right?
That is right.
Where is there life for him? There was a short window where people thought, he's the answer to Trump. He's the establishment's guy. Mm-hmm. Does that continue now? Can he reclaim that mantle?
Well, let's dispel with this notion. Just kidding. I'm not going to make that joke. I mean, I feel like he's got to show well in South Carolina. And what does well look like? I don't know, but it can't be 4th. I think it has to be at least a strong 3rd. It has to beat expectations. I don't know. I don't see a path forward for him if he does not succeed in the next state.
Igor, what's the path they're laying out? What are the expectations they're setting, the Rubio campaign?
They're actually touting their performance in South Carolina right now. You've seen Rubio on the trail. He's a lot more relaxed now. Pointedly so. He's taking a lot more questions. He's actually firing up his rhetoric against people like Trump. You're seeing him do that, and he's totally refrained from doing that for really up until this point. He's risked that confrontation with Trump. So I think it's upping the expectations for him now. Saturday's debate is going to be huge, really. If he doesn't have a good performance there, you can pretty much kiss his campaign goodbye.
By the way, you mentioned relaxed Rubio. Jamie, can we play the audio of Rubio being so relaxed that here he is in South Carolina joking about eating a frozen Twix bar, which I didn't even know existed. Here he is.
I bit into a Twix bar that I think was potentially frozen and from just cold weather or whatever, and I cracked a molar. But we're going to keep campaigning. We are not suspending our campaign over Toothgate.
I want to talk about one thing really quickly, because the reason that came up is because he was at a restaurant eating blueberry pancakes with blueberry syrup. Now, you want to talk about gaffes.
That's a sin right there.
Blueberry syrup on blueberry pancakes? Oh, absolutely not. Hardest of passes.
Why?
You go maple on blueberry.
Yeah.
You don't put bloob on bloob. You go maple on blueberry pancake. This is an amateur mistake made by a very thin man. This is not good.
He is literally breaking down.
Yes, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, the wheels are off
before our eyes.
But when I saw that Rubio moment where he repeated himself, I literally thought there was something wrong with his brain. I couldn't understand why he couldn't say anything else.
I know, especially after you get called on it. I'm like, I turned to my husband. I said, "Am I insane? Is he really saying this again?" And then I started laughing.
It was an unbelievable.
No, Igor, their spin initially was, "Well, it's the press, and I'm going to continue saying it because it's so important." Then he came in 5th, and he said, "Oh, I could have done better. I didn't do well. It's not going to happen again." What's their explanation?
Their explanation, and his explanation, has been that he didn't want to demoralize his campaign workers, younger staff. So they were trying to project an air of confidence. Obviously, that didn't work. I think voters want somebody who will recognize they made a mistake rather than just flatly deny it. In my opinion, I kind of think he got a raw deal. I think of if I was standing on that stage, granted I'm not running for president, but like if I repeated a sentence a couple times, which I probably would, I would say
You're too smooth
things
for
a lot
that.
worse than that. I mean, Rick Perry completely forgot an agency that he would cut. I think that's far worse than Rubio did.
Yeah,
So,
that was worse.
Oops. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you could forget. I mean, yes, huge gaffe, but here, just to repeat the same line that feels to me like, are you not prepared? Are you worried? Are you scared? Do you have nothing else to say? What do you?
Right.
That to me is like just a huge mistake. I don't know if it's worse than Perry, frankly. Maybe on the same level.
Right, because the Perry thing, it's like a one-time like brain freeze maybe, but like the Rubio thing, I was like, oh my god.
All right, so Igor, very quickly, where do they say they have to finish in South Carolina and then Nevada to still be viable, or are they just kind of saying we're gonna do well?
They're expertly not placing a place. They're naming a place finish, but they better finish first or second, otherwise they're completely out of it.
Yeah. Igor Bobich, Associate Politics Editor at Huffington Post. Follow him on Twitter at Igor Bobich, HuffingtonPost.com. Igor, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And this Igor will be back after this.
Your progressive headquarters for the 2016 election. This is The Bill Press Show.
On opening body bags after Typhoon Haiyan. I can only imagine it like unearthing a scab. Zipper breaks open one by one. Mothers trying to dig through themselves an umbilical cord to lend life to a limp ghost. There is not enough relief here to hide the scent of what this child used to be. The coconut trees are not high enough to see over the inside out that was made here. Bags do not have the honor of being called burial plots. Churches ain't supposed to be mausoleums. Tacloban was morphed into ground zero. And I watch this while it snows in Madison, Wisconsin, a place where it's easier to live as a rodent than it is to be a colored person. This place drowns my people in a different way. I inhabit both places like Jigsaw Corpse, trying to find itself whole. These brown boys in Tacloban aren't my cousins, but I want to carry them to safety. These brown girls in Tacloban aren't my daughters, but I want to tell them they're still growing after this choking, but I'm still an ocean away, a language farther from root. A skin tone lighter than the sand, born there, raised here, home nowhere. To watch this storm is a sorry excuse for mourning. It is to need the sun desperately. It is to realize that your body is in one country while your grief is in another. To look at your house, walk to a river, and come back to no house is to be Filipino. To look at your motherland hurting from a TV screen is to be Filipino-American. To watch my islands through the blue eyes of Anderson Cooper is the most American I have ever felt, but I still cry for them, and I still pray for them because God tried to make them Atlantis before they were ready to be a myth just yet, because rebuilding is the Filipinos' most intrinsic muscle memory, but most painful trauma, because relief is just a word whose Tagalog translation I don't even know, because this poem is all I can give for my country, bleeding in salt water. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord keeps trying to drown us. Hallowed be thy bodies. Thy kingdom come down in waves and winds on earth as it is destroyed. Take us this day our daily rations, and forgive those who have tried to kill us as we forgive those who have tried to kill us. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us whose skin has always meant sin now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is The Bill Press Show.
47 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show continues here with Daniela Gibbs-Leger, the Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategy at the Center for American Progress.
Very good.
Still with us. Daniela, we've touched on the Dems. Of course, they had their big night last night in Wisconsin. But the Republicans who are now in South Carolina are, well, they're still at it. I want to play here some audio from Ted Cruz, who, of course, finished second in Iowa, was third or fourth in New Hampshire, somewhere not in a very impressive place, and of course thinks that South Carolina will be a good place for him to pop again, hitting the issues that he thinks are going to resonate with social conservatives. Here he is going after Planned Parenthood after 12 separate investigations have found that Planned Parenthood has done nothing wrong when it comes to selling fetal tissue.
If I'm elected president, on the first day in office, I will instruct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any and all criminal violations.
Yeah. See, to me, I don't understand. I mean, I understand that facts don't matter in this race for them. Right. That you could have a situation where in Texas they were looking into Planned Parenthood, found there's nothing there, and indicted the videographers of those videos, and yet still none of that matters at all.
No.
And I don't then understand, you do that in the primary, what's your pivot in the general?
Well, if it's Ted Cruz, what makes you think there's going to be a pivot? I don't...
Pivot to where?
Yeah,
pivot to the Senate.
I don't think he... Exactly, pivot right back to the Senate. I don't think he can pivot to his left. He won't. He is so ideologically pure. I don't see him not saying this on the campaign trail if he is a nominee.
And here he is talking about same-sex marriage. Again, not really discussed by Republicans because the country's quickly moving in the other direction. But that's not stopping Ted Cruz.
There is something profoundly wrong when Republican presidential candidates are repeating Barack Obama's talking points on gay marriage, saying, we surrender, we give up, we might as well light the White House up in rainbow colors.
And that's the worst thing. The worst thing are rainbow colors.
Yeah. We might as well do something drastic, like change the lighting.
Switch out those light bulbs.
I'm pretty sure they already did that, so you burnt Ted Cruz. You know what? He scares me. But on the one hand, I'm like, kudos to him. You stay true to your crazy self and fight the culture wars that are over. Okay, Ted Cruz. Obviously, like I said, he I don't know if he thinks that this is what's going to, win him the nomination, if he cares, or he's just like, I am who I am. And I don't care that the country has moved in a different way. I don't like the way the country's moved, so I'm going to keep saying what I've been saying. And the rest of y'all can, whatever.
But, we know a lot of Republicans in our lives, right?
Yes.
Not a lot, but some. but we know Republicans. Every Republican that I know in my life, including my parents who live in South Carolina, who are extremely hardcore conservatives, they don't care about gay marriage anymore.
Right.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
All the conservatives I know in my life, I'm not making this up, they just go, yeah, okay, whatever. Right, whatever. It's not a fight for them anymore. So I don't know why he thinks that this is a winning issue, because nobody cares.
But you know what is? Do we have time for one more sound? I think we do, right? You know what is a winning issue is what Trump is saying. This, I think, is going to be a big problem, not just for Jeb, but for whoever becomes the nominee, because this right here is what no general election voter wants.
You have a guy like Bush who has this big fund. It's terrible. I'll be honest. The last thing we need is another Bush. That I can tell you.
The problem isn't just Jeb, who of course has his brother cutting ads for him, radio and TV in South Carolina, but it's the Bush that's going to hang over their necks when it comes to their foreign policy, which is very Bushian, and it's going to have all the same advisors that George W. Bush had. It's their economic policy, which is going to be very Bushian, and it's going to have all the same advisors that George W. Bush had. We haven't really explored this yet because it's early on, but do you see this as an issue moving forward, Danielle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's because right now they're all like concerned with beating each other up, and there's not one person. But yeah, as soon as the Republicans have a nominee, and as soon as they start rolling out the same tired policies of George W. Bush, we'll be like, hey guys, remember how much we hated George W. Bush's presidency? Yeah. Here you go, 2.0. Do you really want to do this?
And that's why I also don't get the jab strategy, because even if he thinks he has a shot moving forward, how do you pivot from those ads?
I don't know. I really don't.
I just think like sometimes these campaigns are stuck in a different time period.
Yeah.
In the day of Twitter and the day of Facebook, it's not so easy to just move towards the middle, and people are so much more engaged. Information is so much more available. You can't do what you could have done when George W. Bush was running for president.
Right. Exactly. Unless you're Donald Trump, and then the rules don't apply.
Yeah, nothing matters.
Nothing matters
Nothing
at all.
Nothing matters. Daniela Gibbs-Leger, she's the Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategy at the Center for American Progress. Again, at DGibber123 on Twitter. I'm Igor Volsky. Parting thoughts right after this.
Follow us on Twitter at BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
For my 6th birthday, my grandpa gave me a Rubik's Cube. I'll always be able to remember its edges, hold it in my hands, heft the weight of an overwhelming problem. I remember him telling me about it. How Rubik's Cube has 43 quintillion, 252 quadrillion, 3 trillion, 274 billion, 489 million, 856,000 possibilities. He told me it can be really confusing sometimes. But to look at the center squares as a reminder of what color each side should be. Shift. We're celebrating his 50th wedding anniversary. He and Grandma are dancing a dance that only fragile legs and wrinkled hands know how to. That type of happiness took him 70 years to earn. The white side of the cube is solved. Shift. He tells me about how he met Grandma. His college friends had a sunset picnic. She was there, as beautiful as an unsolved puzzle. She was a red-headed scramble on an orange tile sky. Shift. The walls of the hospital are blue. The nurses explained that his memories had become jumbled. Strangers in family portraits, pictures with mismatched faces. Alzheimer's has made his mind into a Rubik's Cube. Shift. He's a highway patrolman. His car is white. No, it's blue. He worked there for 30 years. Some nights he still does. Time is a complicated algorithm. Shift. The pills he holds are yellow and red and green. The weight of their color causes his hand to drop. I try to shift his tiles back into place, but people don't have center squares. His mind is a hospital bed divided by 0. Shift. My sister's wedding is white, but he doesn't know why. Shift. World War II is every color. The South Pacific is blue. The islands are green. There is so much red. Shift. Grandpa, table, cube, name, scramble, California, guitar, grapefruit, highway, wedding bell, war, stick shift rifles, South Pacific mirrors, shift, 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 shift. The temperature of his hands is blue. Death is colorless. I will always remember his edges. Hold him in my hands, heft the weight of an overwhelming problem. I was unable to attend his funeral. I never found out the algorithm to solve him. A Rubik's Cube has over 43 quintillion possibilities. A casket only has one.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 57 minutes after the hour, we've been talking a lot about this notion that you can't criticize Obama that Hillary has put forward. I just want to read Obama's own words here in Springfield, Illinois on Thursday. Here he is describing what he sees are his shortcomings. Quote, "There is no doubt that every step of the way, every day that I'm in that office, maybe I could have done that a little better." He's talking about the political polarization that's sweeping Washington. And he specifically admits that he made a mistake by inviting colleagues or friends from the other side of the aisle to social events at the White House. Quote, "Politically, it was hazardous because it looked and put out a certain message for how things are going to get done." And look, this is the whole point. We make mistakes, we learn from those mistakes, but to learn from those mistakes, you've got to be brave enough to admit it. So let's just be honest. Mistakes were made, we will learn, we will get better. I'm Igor Wolski, Center for American Progress Action Fund. Bill back on Monday. Bye-bye.
This is the Bill Press Show.